there's to complain about.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Good to be good. Be the difference. For this webinar, attendees will be in a listen-only mode. If you need technical assistance, please submit your request under the Tech tab in the window in the top right-hand corner of your computer screen. If you wish to submit a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A window in the top right-hand corner of your computer screen. Presenters will do their best to answer your questions. However, due to time constraints, not all questions may be addressed during the webinar. It is now my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Chuck Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chuck Kelly. I'm the CFO of Health EZ, and I'm happy to be here with you today. As Phil mentioned, please post your questions throughout the session we'll do our best to get to all of those by the end of the session. We're very lucky to have with us today two guests, Troy Simonson and Paul Batz. They're co-authors of Be the Difference, Bringing Goodness Back to Healthcare, The Journey of Twin Cities Orthopedics, which they published in October of 2020. Troy serves as the CEO of Revo Health, which is dedicated to leading the value-based care revolution. Revo helps medical specialty practices design and build value-based care solutions for their patients. And prior to that, Paul served as the CEO of Twin Cities Orthopedics, which is one of the largest orthopedic practices in the country. Paul is a best-selling author, speaker, and CEO of Good Leadership Enterprises. He founded Good Leadership to help CEOs, business owners, executives, and community leaders grow with the goodness, the idea goodness pays, Paul's not-so-secret sauce is demonstrating how excellence, generosity, fairness, and positivity are rewarded with great business results. Paul's also a prolific blogger and author of 7 other books as well. Paul and Troy, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. And before we get going, just wanted to quickly introduce everyone who is not familiar with Health EZ to Health EZ. We are an independent third-party administrator of healthcare plans. The company was founded in 1982, and we are located in Bloomington, Minnesota. We administer partially self-funded plans for employers across the country. And we are known for customization, innovation in technology, and a very high level of concierge customer service, which we're very proud of. And with that, I will hand it over to Paul and Troy.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate the opportunity. It's amazing that 1 year ago today was when the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, and man, have we learned a lot since then. One of the things we've learned is that we don't have to be chained to our desk. Hey, Troy, where are you at today?
I am sitting in Key West, Florida right now. So I'm missing the nice warm weather in Minnesota, though.
Yeah, and I'm down in the Phoenix area of Arizona, and normally the offices of Good Leadership are within about a half a mile from where you sit, Chuck, in Bloomington. So we're super happy that we could figure out how to do this today. I'm learning how to love this media. I really appreciate everybody spending some time with us today. We'll get you done with at least 5 minutes to transition to your next meeting. So Troy, would you get us started? Yeah, when we wrote this book, you were the CEO of Twin Cities Orthopedics. Now you're a part of the Revo organization, which they're cousins, they're still related. But would you tell us a little bit about TCO?
Yeah, appreciate it, Paul, and thank you, everyone. Twin Cities Orthopedics is an independent orthopedic practice in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market. A little over 110 physicians in the practice. The physicians are the owners of the practice, and a little over 1,500 employees across the organization. And TCO now has become a part of a larger multi-specialty practice referred to as Infinite Health in the market, or iHealth. So constant evolution continues to happen.
Yeah, and I can also add that Twin Cities Orthopedics became sort of a Cinderella brand in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market when you, Troy, partnered with Kevin Warren at the Minnesota Vikings and to label the Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, which is the headquarters of the Minnesota Vikings. And it was just amazing publicity and really kind of changed the sports scene in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So that was really, really cool. The next slide has to do with, what is good leadership? Good leadership is my firm, but it's also a concept that we bring to life here. And Phil, I'm going to ask you to bring that slide back up. I just have 2 more. Yeah, thank you very much. The next slide, let's see, I'll get out of this and move on. Yeah, so what is good leadership? Good leadership is a concept that anybody in business wants to make sure they have alive in their organization. It's defined as the art and science of people working together to create consistently great results. We believe that good leadership is a team sport because we all know nothing significant ever really happens alone, which means we help organizations kind of push back that superhero model that's made popular in the business media and the movies and things like that. And the underlying assumption is that we believe goodness pays. So we're also a firm that partners with organizations like TCO and Revo. We were established in 2009. Our headquarters is in the Minneapolis market we talked about. We have regional, national, and international clients. It's been exciting this week. We work with Merck, who's now partnering with Johnson & Johnson, and it's been fascinating to talk to people all over the world. A part of that, their sense of pride in being in the vaccine solution is super high. We put together a team of coaches that helps the executive teams of our clients get to the next level, and we're really proud to say that every single client we have is winning in their marketplace. The program today is organized around these 4 concepts. First, why did Troy decide to write a book? Second is, what did we hope to accomplish by writing this book together? And third, what did we learn about ourselves and about TCO specifically? And then we have some very specific takeaways that we'll bring back before we get to a Q&A section. So I'll toss it over to you, Troy, and ask this question. And Phil, you can go ahead and take the slides down, please. So Troy, why actually did you decide to write a book?
Well, I'll be the first to admit I never thought I would write a book. And obviously there's definitely some encouragement from you, Paul, and good leadership to do it. And ultimately it was, we were in a period of rapid growth across TCO, the evolution of Infinite Health. Revo Health was continuing to grow as kind of a sister organization to TCO and iHealth. And really I came to you with a concern about, how do we maintain our culture? And how do we continue to maintain that inside of an organization that is just experiencing rapid growth? And one of the solutions, not the only solution, but was to write the book to a certain extent, tell the story of what had been established across TCO over multiple years.
Mm-hmm. Even before the book was an idea, though, I kept encouraging you to write it down. We'd heard a lot of ideas about Be the Difference, which is a cultural label that you guys created. You had a manager, you got people together. But in the early days, when I said, well, what do you really mean by that? We had some pretty important conversations back and forth. Can you just talk a little bit about what that was like to start getting that out of your head and your heart and actually onto paper?
Liberating, to be honest, to actually get it out and just to continue to talk about it amongst our leadership group, and then obviously bringing that down even with the employees to help them understand of what do we mean by be the difference. It's stuck with the organization for many years, but it's the classic scenario of It's not a destination. It's just this ongoing journey to continue to talk about it. And the more I got it out of my head, the better it was. And frankly, the classic scenario of I thought everyone understood what I was thinking, but it definitely wasn't the case all the time, where others weren't on the same page all the time. But the more obviously we communicated, the more we were able to ultimately get to the right page.
Yeah, well, I'd like you to describe for us, please, what does Be the Difference mean? Like literally for people who haven't read the book yet. And then I want to talk a little bit about, so how does this actually play out in the day-to-day operations of Twin Cities Orthopedics? So let's go first to, what does Be the Difference mean? Can you explain it to us?
So we had a discussion about this multiple years ago of what is our call to action of all of our employees. The simple question about when an employee is driving to work in the morning and they ask themselves, why am I going to work today? We got to have an answer for that. And that's where we came up with the be the difference. Obviously, 3 simple words. But we expect all employees to find a way to be the difference every moment of the day. That's with patients, could be patient family members, their coworkers. Many individuals don't have that direct patient contact. So how am I making a difference with my coworkers? How am I making their job easier? How am I making them more efficient? But it's just that simple answer of, what is my purpose today? Paul, you talking about a lot of why do I matter? Well, I matter today because I'm responsible to find a way to make a difference with a patient or with my coworker, with one of the physician owners, whatever it might be. And that, again, creating that culture and that focus on excellence, that we're always trying to find a way to make a difference with anyone and everyone we come in contact with.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the reference back to why I matter. So when we engage with organizations like TCO that just really are a very high quality organization, but they have really big aspirations, we try to help people rally around 3 basic ideas. The first idea is, where are we going to play in the market in a way that we believe that we can win? So where am I going to play and how are we going to win? And everybody needs to wrap their head around that and become sort of united in it. That creates tons of confidence. Then we have to translate it into, so where do I fit into this? What do you want from me? And then why does my work matter? And to me, I had never seen any client in the 25 years I've been doing this work and the 11 years of good leadership that had articulated a better why do I matter statement than the people at TCO. The trouble is, it was still kind of in the clouds. And we needed to write it down, which we'll get to that later in the context of a leadership expectation model. I'm just wondering, can you give me a 1-minute example, a story about how the Be the Difference actually made a difference in the life of a patient?
And this is at the most simplistic level ever. And I use this with all of our new employees at their employee onboarding. We talk about the Be the Difference culture and what is expected of them. But I still remember, I'll never forget this. I received a 1.5-page letter, actually from a patient's son who had brought in his elderly father into the clinic to be seen. And he wrote, a couple things just about the care of his father and that. And but the 2 things that he wrote multiple paragraphs about, and this is how simple this can be. And this is what we talk about with our employees. And not that this made, a life-changing event for the patient necessarily, but 2 very simple things that happened that day that, again, the patient's son took the time to write a letter about it, is 1, he was greeted at the front desk with a smile. And it wasn't just simply, what's your name? It was, how are you doing today? How can I help you? And then the other thing that happened that, frankly, I had never thought about this a lot, but we talk about it all the time now across TCO, is the patient actually needed some x-rays done. So they had to go from the x-ray room or their exam room back to the x-ray room. So instead, and that X-ray tech came to get the patient, and instead of walking in front of the patient and just, praying to God that the patient was following them, they walked side by side with them back to the X-ray room and made a little small talk on the way back to the X-ray room. And that simple thing was just resonated with that patient's son about how great it was, how it put his father at ease, and just think of how simple that is. But that made a huge difference for the patient and obviously the patient's son, that X-ray tech just walked side by side with that individual back to the X-ray room. And so now that things like that are stories, obviously, we can tell across TCO and just make those simple changes that they're very impactful. And that's something we as well try to get all of our employees to understand, is that it doesn't have to be a major, earth-shattering difference that you're making. It's the really simple things that really add up and make the key difference.
Well, you also have the data behind it. What was the data when we wrote the book where the patient recommendation rate was?
Yeah, I mean, we are very proud of this inside of TCO. When we wrote the book, I believe it was 98.4% of our patients are willing to recommend TCO to a family member or friend. I feel that's the ultimate test of your service. Happy to report now, I believe we're at 99%. So we're still able to move the needle. And that's basically people responding with yes or definitely yes, they are willing to recommend us to a family or friend.
Well, let's jump to our first audience poll. We have 4 polls for you today. We hope you participate. The first audience poll, I'll ask Phil, why don't you go ahead and just get this going, is, has your executive team created a simple label? The example would be the difference for your company culture. Yes or no? We'll wait just a second as we watch some of this stuff, some of the data come in. I did get one question already from the audience. We really, really appreciate that. Troy, I'll ask you to answer this as a bridge here. So that question is the Be the Different culture for iHealth and Revo too? You mentioned 3 entities, and then also we'll talk later about what's it like creating a culture in a brand new company. Looks like we've pretty much completed the poll. So Phil, can you show us the results here, please?
Whoops, sorry. It looks like it's coming in at about 67% yes and about 39% no at this moment.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, 67-33. So a third of us have not yet put a label on our culture, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity. We could ask another question to dive deeper: is underneath the label, have we done the articulation the way they did at TCO? But I'll let you talk just a second. How is the Be the Difference concept alive at also the iHealth level and then Revo?
Yeah, and so yes, we are bringing the Be the Difference culture across all the entities. Obviously, that is a process across iHealth as we bring new practices into iHealth. We are continuing to educate and help them understand the importance of the Be the Difference culture and that level of service that we provide to patients. And then as it relates to Revo, Revo was somewhat, I'll say, inside of TCO, and we spun it out essentially back in 2017. They kind of ran parallel with each other for a number of years. So I would say the biggest difference, though, is now inside of Revo Health, we talk about clients instead of necessarily maybe patients. So how are we making a difference with our clients? One of our clients being TCO and other entities across the country. So it probably more than anything, it just changes of who your audience is, but the culture in and of itself and that culture of service still exists. It's just who is your audience is what is changing.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. And this is where I'll say we really appreciate your questions. We can take a look at them and tie them into the conversation as we go. So, Troy, let's talk a little bit about what did we try to accomplish in a way that is tangible by writing a book. So, the process of writing a book is not simple. This book was interrupted by COVID, and it requires a lot of people, a lot of support. I can't think of how many hundreds of hours of people contributed behind the scenes to help you finish this. So obviously you've got to be able to say to your physicians and your employees and your fellow colleagues that are on the executive table, why are we doing this and what are we trying to accomplish? So can you tell us what you were trying to accomplish with it?
Well, I think it goes back to even one of the first things I mentioned about why write the book, and it was really one to we use the book with all of our new employees, so it's to provide them background of the Be the Difference culture to help them understand it. So it's somewhat to help, I'll say, educate new employees. With our current employees, we provided books to all of our current employees as well. And part of the purpose of that was a little bit of education, but ultimately for them to take pride in what they have created. This isn't just myself and our leadership team. I mean, this is all employees that have created this culture. And really the third thing that ultimately trying to create from it is that I'll call it smart growth, or that strategic growth that we're trying to have from it, and one helping us understand what is that strategic growth as we move forward. And we talk a lot about there's strategic growth, but there's also smart growth, and how do we grow, in a way that is smart and is scalable and is sustainable. That is a common term as well used. I mean, we can all grow, but is it truly sustainable?
Yeah. Well, and also from you and I wrote this book together, and part of the idea here was to translate to the employees the different set of expectations that come along with Be the Difference. I think once now, having gone through the process, is that you can have an idea and you can write an outline, and you can turn that outline into an article, and that takes some time and it teaches you some things. But when you turn the article into a book, the energy that you have to put into creating clarity and making sure you really believe what you just wrote, it's a fantastic way to advance the idea. And also the fact that this book, for those people who've seen it already and who have not seen it yet, it's a very small book. We've done a lot of research. At Good Leadership, we own a publishing label called Good Leadership Press. And it exists to help our clients tell their stories in a change management context. So a very small book, one that could fit into a suit coat pocket or a small purse, that's 100 pages or less, that when you put it in someone's hands, they say, oh, wow, this is important. You must really mean this. And in the context of taking it out of the clouds and putting it down, a small book like this really says a lot. And, you and I, there was a high demand. We spent 5 hours signing books one day. So that was a really fun exercise. But I'll say one more thing about this and get your opinion before we do our next poll. What we have seen is happening in the healthcare revolution is that the independent practices, of which TCO is, which was the point of view by which you wrote this book, they are shifting away from a hierarchical chain of command type management system, which all large hospital systems have to do. That's just how they have to stay organized and keep themselves out of trouble. There's a shift going on to the smaller, more nimble independents, moving to what we call a shared commitments culture. One is training and rules based. The other one is coaching and communication based. And when you have a shared commitments culture, you know it because even the physicians are willing to be influenced by the hourly employees who work in the front of the organization. And when you know you've got shared commitments, you can give this thing we call nagging rights. And no matter who I am or how much money I make or how long I've been there, I'm willing to say, yep, if you see me doing something that's not consistent with Be the Difference, you have permission to tell me to knock it off or to show me another way. Can you talk a little bit about what that shared commitments sort of that concept, what that did for TCO?
Yeah, no, and I'll back up a little bit on this even that multiple years ago, and this is where as a leader in an organization, you really need to make sure you understand what culture do you have. And make sure your leaders, your other leaders that are along with you understand that as well. Multiple years ago, actually, before we engaged with good leadership and ultimately then figured this out, is I thought we had a shared commitment culture where people had nagging rights. The rest of our senior leadership team thought it was a hierarchy culture, and they didn't think they had nagging rights. So we were on two different pages, and I was frustrated by it because I'm like, no one ever challenges me. And I thought that's the culture we had, but it wasn't. And so I think that as a leader of an organization as well, as you really need to understand that piece of it first to kind of dial it in about, well, here's what you think you've got, but what does your team think the culture is for that? And so now we have definitely moved into that shared commitment culture and leadership structure, and it's very healthy. We have a structure where we have about it's probably close to 90 owners, and those being the physicians. So ultimately, we have that shared commitment between the physician governance board and the non-physician leadership group. And then obviously inside of that leadership group that we have that shared commitment that everyone does have those nagging rights. People can challenge ideas that are brought up and not necessarily challenge, but ask questions about it and continue to, kind of mold that idea or that thought that we can continue to kind of evolve it as we go instead of just whatever is said, well, that's what we have to do. Even though we might not all agree with it, it's not that culture where, again, it's well, here's what was said, so I just got to figure out how to deal with it. That's not the culture. It's the shared commitment side of, okay, is everyone's questions answered? Are we all on the same page? Do we understand, why we're moving this direction? And that's where that be the difference comes back into play as well as our 5 core values of whatever our strategy is, does it allow us to make the difference? We put on one of our new clinics now, we have the words right in our main lobby. It says, experience the difference. Well, so now we're public with it. So strategies that we have, do they support that be the difference culture? And by having that culture, it makes those decisions just that much easier. And there's been strategies or ideas that, someone's come back and said, well, that doesn't support what we're trying to do here. Yeah, it's a good idea, might be a short-term strategy, but it's not a long-term sustainable strategy that supports the culture.
Well, let's ask the second poll here now. Phil, I'll use your help here in starting this. On the second poll is, has your organization shifted from a hierarchical chain of command culture to a shared commitments culture? We're just curious to find out how people are thinking about this. As this is happening, I want to explain one of the underlying concepts here in a nagging rights culture, and that is where we encourage people to create healthy tension. That harmony, specifically false harmony, really is the enemy of high performance in any type of organization. And to be able to encourage people at all levels to create tension in a healthy way where no one feels attacked or undermined. And it's that healthy tension that actually really fuels high performance. And that's a big piece of what we try to do in the coaching work and in the values that we're trying to create in these organizations. So I see over here now that we've been able to pull the questions here. So this one's a little different. We have 64% who said yes, they've made that shift, but 36% no, they haven't made that shift yet. And so I think that a shared commitment culture is not right for every single organization. And what we're learning now, particularly in the value-based care environment that you guys are so good at, there are so many people that have to work together for the benefit of the patient that it's just easier when we make the shift to a shared commitment culture. Troy, can you talk just a little bit about what you're seeing now? Because you're looking sort of from the outside in at TCO, being, building the platform at Revo, and also looking across all of the iHealth organizations. Maybe you can tell us how many organizations are in iHealth today, and then how's the shared commitment culture, helping you guys set a consistent set of expectations?
Yeah, so now inside of iHealth, which iHealth is basically a little over a year old as it relates to an entity. We have 7 different specialties inside of iHealth, close to 190 physicians across the organization now, and that's just going to continue to see growth. We've had great interest from practices across the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, and really that shared commitment piece is I would go back to the nagging right side of it, in that everyone has the expectation that that they're, and I don't want to use the term calling out, but that they're setting expectations with all of their peers as far as what is the expectation in that Be the Difference culture, and we all share that commitment of service. We use the term service. It really struck me in that one of the first good leadership breakfasts I went to, the term goodness, and it just, the classic light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, well, that's what we're doing. The term goodness is used in one sense, and in the healthcare, we use the term service, and so as we bring groups into iHealth, that's the constant journey of helping groups understand that the piece that will set us apart as independent physicians in the market is that level of service, that Be the Difference culture. And that if I'm a front desk person or a physician owner, we're going to let each other know, what can I do better? And then to have the data to support it, that recommendation rating. So in being transparent with that is, I would say, another big piece of it. So do all your employees know your data? Do they know, is the Be the Difference culture working? Well, we can show them it works. And so that just engages them even further. But we use the term a lot, it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. It's not one way where everything's just getting driven down to employees. It's coming back the other way. We have values champions across the organization, different pieces to get the employees engaged as well.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the specifics here. Phil, if you can put the slides back up, please. Somebody asked me to show the picture of the book, and I'm embarrassed to say that I did not travel with a book. But I have a picture of it on the slide, but I don't have an actual physical book with me in my trip down to Arizona. How about you, Troy? Did you take one
I got one.
Got one with? Oh, good. Show them. Yeah, somebody wanted to see the size of it and just take a good look at it. So, so Troy does have a copy of the book. That's fantastic. So one of the big challenges that there's been a lot of questions here. We'll get to more specific, but how did you articulate this, and what was their pushback? So I know this slide isn't huge, but it does articulate what the leadership expectations are for Be the Difference. And this work came out of the research that we did for our signature book at Good Leadership called How Goodness Pays. It was funded by Richard Davis at US Bank and Greg Page at Cargill. And we wanted to identify what are the behaviors that are expected from leaders at all levels that actually lead to goodness as a cultural cornerstone and positive financial results. So there were 3 things that we did here with this. First, we realized that we needed to segment expectations into 3 different levels. The first level, the lowest level, is individual leadership. These are the physicians themselves, the hourly employees, and the people who show up, with a specific role. Then in the middle, it's the team leaders, the people that have the direct reports who operate the teams of teams that that deliver the care and the service. And then the top level is the organizational level. These are the executives who drive function support in the organization. And when we articulated what was expected at these levels, then we realized there was 3 different areas that we needed to focus on. The first one is, what we call championship results, but industry leading results. It's on the left. In the middle, it's the culture. We call it a winning culture. And then on the far right-hand side, it's thriving communities. The thriving communities are where we get our patients, where we get our employees, and how we create partnerships. I won't cover everything here. I'm willing to share this with anybody who wants to see what the leadership expectation model looks like. But the point is, we took the time, you took the time to gather your people and articulate what was expected in each one of these areas. And I'm curious to find out, Troy, would you talk just a little bit about how did this really fuel the people who are excited about it? And then also, how did you deal with the detractors, the people that just didn't really want to come on board?
Yeah, no, great question. And this is, I'd call this tool, this is really the stickiness that pulls it all together and has, continues to create that unifying culture. In a couple key things with this is, first of all, you need to make sure all your employees understand that they're all leaders. A lot of employees think that there's just a small group, a number of, a dozen or so that are truly leaders in the organization. So the first step is to help all employees understand that we're all leaders. And that's why there's, it continues to ramp up the expectations. It's cumulative as you go from bottom to top. So there's an expectation that we have amongst all individuals inside of the organization. And as you continue to go up in the organization, it continues to accumulate or continues to add on. The ones that really thrive with this model are those, we use the term bright eyes inside the organization. They saw now what they needed to do to continue to grow inside the organization. So it was very clear of, what are the expectations of myself if I want to continue to grow in a leadership role across the organization, and how I would continue to grow. Obviously, yes, we have some detractors from this, but the thing of that is that those that push back on this model, not to be too flippant about it, is that if you think about some of those items on that bottom row, is you can't argue with them. I mean, being a good citizen and just providing good service. How do you argue with that, for one? And in some of the individuals, we had that really frank discussion about, if you don't see yourself fitting in any of these 9 squares here, we're not going to be a good fit as an organization. And instead of the classic pushing a square peg through a round hole, is we need to find a way to separate and move on. We've used this in physician recruitment. So new physicians understand, where do I fit in here and what's expected of me inside of TCO. We obviously use this with new employees. So it just has multiple uses. And frankly, more than anything, for those, the bright shining stars in the organization, they just really gravitated to this because they now see, well, here's what I need to keep working on to continue to be a leader inside the organization. And those are the individuals, let's be honest, those are the individuals that we want to, keep pushing and want to retain as well.
Well, one of the other things that changed once you went public with this stuff is that we at Good Leadership, we talk about involved equals engaged. The more involved people are in planning and creating things like the leadership expectation model, the more engaged they're going to be on a day-to-day basis. And we even think about that in terms of building the annual business plan. So there have been some questions come across here about, well, it's all well and good that you can give encourage them to bring things up and to give them nagging rights, but if nothing happens with their ideas, doesn't that actually hurt your culture? And the answer is absolutely yes. But what we've seen is our clients that take the time to engage people at all levels in providing input to the annual plan. If that means that they find it realistic, means that they understand it, they understand where are we going to play, how do we fit, and why do I matter, and then they get energized by that plan. And when that happens, we call that plan a compelling plan. And the most important thing to long-term sustainable financial results is that the employees and managers and executives uniquely look at the plan and call it a compelling plan. Troy, will you just talk for a couple of minutes about what that transition was like for you guys?
Yeah, and I'll say we're still transitioning. It's still a work in progress. But yeah, so probably about 3 years ago now, we started and made a lot of effort of working on a plan. A strategic plan, one that obviously focused on the business overall, focused on employee growth and all these items, to continue to develop the plan and put it on paper. So I'll be the first to tell you, we didn't have a really solid plan before that was down on paper. It was up in our heads many times, and we just moved, and we were prideful that we were very nimble. But putting the plan on paper was, again, I'll use the term liberating. And probably more important than the plan is we created a quarterly scorecard, that went out to all staff. So they could see the progress with certain plan items, and we just used the simple red, yellow, green light view of it. And we had to be comfortable that some of them are going to have a red light or yellow light. They just can't all be green. And then ultimately that went out to employees on a quarterly basis. And so now those employees were engaged into the plan. And we made sure that every item on that plan, that there were at least 2 items on that plan that every single employee could impact. And frankly, that was easy to do. We could go back and some employee could come back, the detractors, and say, well, I don't impact any of these items. And we could come back to them and say, well, here's how your job impacts item 1, item 4, item 6, whatever it is, and how you impact it on a daily basis. So now they had that buy-in to the strategic plan. We were transparent with our progress as an organization. And it just continues then to unify that culture. And it seems like a simple tool, a quarterly scorecard, but it really resonated with the staff and engaged them, tying them back into that culture.
Yeah, and I'll tie that right back to the leadership expectation model. We believe that it's the senior executive jobs, top here, the organizational leaders, that A, the organization has to have a compelling plan, and B, they need to translate it into a public scorecard that gets reviewed quarterly so everybody knows where we're at. And just that level of clarity has really helped as you've been developing going forward. Hey, Phil, let's do the third question, please, the third poll question. I'm just curious to find out from our audience here today, do you personally find the business plan your company has is compelling? Do you think your business plan is compelling? So when we're doing this now, we will, I'll shift over to the takeaway slide here in just a second. We can get into some of the questions. I can tell you, Troy, one of the questions is going to be interesting for you to answer, because it's, what do you think TCO could still do to get better? And you are going to answer that now as a consultant, because you are no longer actually driving the operations of TCO anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so the answers to this question are similar to the others. So 75%, yes, I find our business plan compelling, and 25% no. And so, it's that 3/4 ratio or 2/3 ratio that's still alive. Most people are affirmative of these concepts, but some of them yet haven't gotten there. So that's good. I really appreciate seeing that data. And I know that if you're curious to see the data that we collected today, I'm sure that the Health Easy folks will share that with you. So I want to ask you the question, Troy. In what ways do you think TCO can still get better? You're at 99%. I mean, that last 1% must be the longest mile.
Right. Ultimately, that's the biggest challenge is maintaining that 99%. And so obviously, just continuing to maintain that, it's really easy if that number was 60%, to take that 60% to 80% is likely an easier objective. But to maintain at 99% is, that frankly, I would say is one of the hardest things to do. So it's constant reminders and information and education to staff. It's constantly being transparent with your data to give them encouragement and also for them to be prideful in what they've accomplished as individuals. So it's I said this early on. It's an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. We're never going to be able to check the box and say we're done. It's constant. And then the other piece of it, I would say, and especially in the healthcare space, is innovation. And it's one of our core values. One of our 5 core values is innovation. And that is going to be the key, especially in an independent practice, of maintaining that innovation and constantly finding ways to do and to deliver healthcare differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, here are the 3 takeaways that we hope that you're getting out of this. So first, culture actually is the breakfast of strategy. That if you've got a strategy to grow, if you've got a strategy to be into value-based care, if you really want to attract more, patients that are maybe feeling lost in some of the bigger systems, we think you have to label your culture and write it down and collaboratively work with people to help that become a competitive advantage for your organization. And the second thing is to really be intellectually honest about the culture that you have. Is it a chain of command, rules-based, training-oriented culture, which it's not inherently bad, or is it a shared commitments culture that you're building, negotiated, coaching-oriented with nagging rights? And I think it's profoundly confusing for employees if you're stuck somewhere in the middle. And I think in some cases, Troy, you found that there were people who preferred the chain of command culture, and that actually meant that they didn't fit what you were trying to do. And then the final piece, and I'll just let you talk about this, is, value-based care really is the future. And, asking yourself, where are you at on this? How can you make that transition faster? And if you are in the service providing world like I am, to the organizations like TCO, Revo, iHealth, where are you as a service provider? Where are you providing value to help people go faster that way? So Troy, I'll give you a chance to talk a little bit about your thoughts about value-based care, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, just real briefly on value-based care, it's probably one of the biggest buzzwords used in healthcare right now. Everyone wants to talk about it. Thankfully, I would say the TCO physicians and other physicians now inside of iHealth have really gravitated towards this and are supportive of it. But it definitely takes, defining your culture. And I'll go back to Michael Porter's value equation, which we use constantly inside the organization. It's a simple math equation of the experience and outcome for the patient divided by the cost. And my big shtick, I would say, about value-based care is, unless you have knowledge and are measuring all 3 of those areas, so understand your patient experience, understand your outcomes, and understand your cost and how you can deliver it at a value in the market, you're not providing value-based care. So unless you're collecting all of that data, I've made the bold statement to some practices that we're not. You can't talk about it.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you're talking about value-based care because you don't know what your patient outcomes are.
Yeah.
You might know what the experience is, but then if you don't know what the cost is either, it's like, well, how can you define value then at the end of the day using that formula from Michael Porter? And again, that's another big term inside of TCO and iHealth, is the term value. And how are we adding value day in and day out? Are we changing the site of service for that surgery? Well, we know that's going to add value if we do that. Are we measuring outcomes? We're obviously measuring patient experience. What are we doing daily on that? And I'll be the first to tell you it's not easy, because you're changing a long history of physicians and physicians, making decisions that they think is best. And historically, physicians have not had a lot of data when they've made those decisions. Now they have the data. And so now the data is pushing them in certain directions at times as well. So it becomes a very interesting discussion at times.
Yeah. Well, we have time for two quick questions. I've been sprinkling those questions inside this interview here. The first, how did work from home, when everybody had to work from home, how did that impact be the difference? And I'll just let you answer that quickly.
I would say tougher on the Revo side. So obviously in the clinic-based world, it's tough to work from home when you run a clinic. Yeah. So they're on site. But on the Revo side, it's impacted us. I'll be the first to tell you that we're going to push to have people come back to the office. I use the term, the pendulum isn't going to swing all the way back, though. It's not going to be back to where we used to be. It's going to be some hybrid model, but I'm a huge believer that teams have to be together physically. And, because today what happens by not being connected at least a couple days a week is that 5-minute question that you would ask in the office is now a 45-minute Zoom call. And so we're just not as efficient as we could have been previously, or as we were. And I think it's really hard to develop a culture when everyone's at home in their own silo. The teams have got to come together. Again, I'm not going to be the first to tell you that we're not going to be all back in the office just like we always were. It's going to be some hybrid model, but I'm a huge believer that we got to be around each other to build that and grow that culture, and that's where the nagging rights comes into play even.
Yeah. Well, the final question I'll ask is a 1-minute answer from you. And we mentioned the healthy tension. One of the people picked up on that in this conversation, saying, how does that really play out? Can you give us an example of where people were empowered to create healthy tension? They did, and it actually, made everything better in your mind. So healthy tension, Troy.
I think it's just even in our senior leadership team that, again, before, where I thought we had the shared commitment culture and we didn't, and it was becoming frustrating for myself that no one ever disagreed with me. And now they all have those nagging rights, and there's some healthy tension conversations, and we've not moved forward with certain strategies because of it, because I thought, one thing, and then when they started pushing me and asking questions about, well, how does this fit with our 5 values? How does this fit with a sustainable Be the Difference culture? I couldn't answer them. Well, guess what? That's off the list. We're no longer going to waste time on it. Before, that would have never happened. We would have moved forward with it. It likely would have failed, 6 months down the road or whatever, and we'd have moved on, but we would have wasted a lot of time over those 6 months. So it's just a much better environment, healthier environment. It gets uncomfortable at times. I'll be the first to tell you that. There's times where everyone gets a little uneasy in their chair, but again, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll toss it back to you, Chuck, as we ask the final question, and it's a really simple question. Do you want us to send you the book? Nazi and her team were really excited about sharing this. If you want a book, they'll send it to you. So you can respond to that. The poll will be live now, and I'll send it back to you, Chuck. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Troy. We were just very lucky to have you here with us today. Culture is so important, especially in healthcare. Little secret, TCO has been a customer of Health EZ's and iHealth now for more than a decade, and we're just very lucky to have TCO as a customer and a partner that shares the values that we have too. And so, thank you for that, Troy. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this webinar series. We We'll be able to share more with you about our sponsors and in future webinars and in mailings if you're on our mailing list, and excited about that. You guys mentioned value-based care. One of our future webinars is going to highlight value-based care. So if you're interested in that, be sure to be on the lookout for an invitation. And finally, just a reminder, our next webinar in the series is going to be on April 6th. It's titled Respect and Diversity, and it is going to be hosted by actress Elizabeth Rahm. So we're very excited about that. And we also have a special edition on March 17th, part of our women's series, and that is titled Post-Pandemic Parenting. So if you're interested in those, be sure to sign up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Paul. Thank you again, Troy, and have a wonderful day, everybody.